I think we are on. We're ready. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the globe. Welcome to the 30th International Conference on Management of Technology plenary session, which is one of the very important sessions of this conference. And we are indeed delighted to have a panel and a panelist discussion about areas related to what is the pressing issues in technology management. Our panelist leader is Jeff Baetz. And Jeff is Global Industry Chief Technology Officer of IBM Industrial Market for Data, AI, Machine Learning, and Data Science Elite. And Jeff has started his career journey in analytics back in 1997, has worked for several technology original equipment manufacturers and business partners, understanding how to control the complex sales and solving clients' business problems, leveraging software technologies and services. He joined IBM in 2016 and worked for some of the largest technology provider companies, such as AT&T, Nortel Networks, Verizon, SAS, just to name a few. But he has also worked and was a leader in adopting the open source analytics. He was named an account manager and an analytics portfolio sales leader assigned to Toyota, Lexus, Ford Motor Companies, FCA, Delphi Technologies, Boeing, Honda, North America, you name it, all the big companies in the US and the multinationals. Jeff was born and raised in Metro Detroit, and he's lived all his life in that area, certainly working with the largest automotive companies in the world. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Jeff Baetz and let him lead the panel and introduce his panelists as he sees fit. Thank you, Jeff, for being with us, and it's all yours.
Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for that nice introduction. My team today, I'd like to give the opportunity for Deema to start and have Deema introduce herself. Then we'll have Nick and then Mohammed introduce themselves and their backgrounds, and then we'll get into a little overview on the abstract that I submitted that got us to this panel this morning, and then I will MC the questions that we've prepared. So thank you again for having us today, and we very much appreciate the invitation. So Deema, do you want to take it?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Deema Alathel, or Deema Alathel, as my colleagues in the US know me as. So I am leading the data and AI, global data and AI business development here at IBM. And I come from an AI background. I got my PhD in AI from the George Washington University, and it's really a pleasure to be joining the panel today.
Thank you, Deema. Nick?
Yes, hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great privilege to be on this panel and also to be speaking to so many wonderful people from around the world. So thank you so much for having me. So my name is Nick Holmes. I am the Global Government CTO for Government. And so while Jeff focuses on industrial clients, I focus on government clients. I have about 20 years of experience working with different government agencies based in the United States, and but have spent a tremendous amount of time on the global scene talking to clients like yourselves around the world. For me personally, this is a little bit like coming home, to be honest with you. While Deema definitely is a PhD in all things smart and data and AI, my undergraduate degree is actually in Egyptology. I studied at University College London. I graduated way too long ago to even think about and embarrass myself on this stage. But it's lovely to come back and virtually speak to you guys. And Mohammed, I would love to take you up on that offer you made at the beginning of coming back to Cairo, as I spent many happy times there in my relative youth.
Thank you, Nick. What a great opportunity to now have Mohammed introduce himself. Mohammed, go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff. My name is Mohammed Azam. I'm a board member of the International Association of Management of Technology, as well as I'm a member of the board of trustees of the Arab Council for Social Responsibility. And now I'm connecting the social responsibility with technology to have more impact on the society, on the citizen, as well as the small and micro businesses, creating more jobs, having a better life for Egyptians and the people with especially with a special focus on youth, women, people with disability, and marginal segments. I've been working for a long time in the area of technology. I've been working in the area of developing and clustering micro small enterprises towards having connected economic clusters across the country as well as across the region. Of course, Nick, next time I would love to have you here and we'll go for adventure. I think you will be my tour guide in this case. I won't be that. Looking forward, definitely. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, you're welcome, and let's get started. So I have some good news to report. It's been a year since we've last seen each other, and I am absolutely delighted to let the team know how happy I am about being a member of your advisory board. So thank you for accepting my voluntary offer to be a part of that advisory board. For us, advisory boards are really important because we're able to continue to press or at least introduce our points of view about what we're seeing and hearing from our clients so we can continue to collaborate with all of our partners around the world. So when I had the opportunity to introduce an abstract that I wrote, the title of the abstract that I submitted was data privacy in a post-COVID-19 world. Is privacy out the window? ? And based on some of the additional research that I've been doing around this topic, because I've given this talk a couple times, we have obviously witnessed a number of unplanned disruptions in the workplace-related models, procedures, locational-based challenges. Is employee privacy out the window? I think that's a question that we're all going to ask each other today and get your perspectives on things because of what the pandemic has done. And can we continue to maintain a level of what we call employee trust? Or do we have confidence in the data that's being collected on us, on everybody that's on this panel or globally? Are companies now or organizations now in a position where they have to adopt new social media policies? Here in the United States, we obviously have the HIPAA related healthcare privacy policies, but collected personal information, financial information. What are corporations doing to safeguard this data, the security of the data, and the integrity of the data? We have a number of personal experiences that I know that Deema is going to talk about that she's witnessed in country as well about how countries or kingdoms are actually managing this. But really what this is about is how do we maintain any type of trust or integrity when we have connected IoT devices that are doubling or even tripling the amount of data that's being collected on us. So we have a number of experts today that are going to provide us with their feedback. But first I wanted to start off with Nick Holmes. And Nick, the first question I wanted to ask you, and please take as much time as you'd like because we do have a full hour, is would you support a conclusion that AI technologies have not been real effective because of the lack of data, or in some cases, people believe there's too much data? Can you let the audience know what your point of view is on how to provide more balance around the need for public health awareness without violating either country or human-related privacy laws. Nick, go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff, for that very stimulating question to get us kicked off and started. I think I'd like to cover, three areas, sort of in my response to this question. Firstly, I'd like to talk a little bit about augmented versus artificial intelligence. I think that, we've got a little bit of clarity that I've seen, that we need to sort of address a little bit there. Secondly, I'd like to touch on the topic of sort of like using use cases to determine that augmented intelligence and how we would be using it. Then the third one, since I'm obviously related to government, really want to be focusing on how I'm seeing governments execute that very relevant and very important piece around data privacy. So those would be the three topics I'd like to be touching on. If I stray too much off that path, feel free to rein me back in, because I do get excited. And when I do get excited, I do speak a little bit too quickly. So if I'm going too fast, I'm going to look at Deema and she's going to be like, Nick, just relax a little bit, right? Because I know you get passionate about these things. So let's get started, right? In my first point, artificial versus augmented intelligence. I think that this is really important to note, right? From an IBM perspective, we think of things always, when we say AI, we interpret AI as augmented intelligence. What does that mean very simply and very straightforwardly in my mind is that we will always be keeping the human in the loop, right? And so I think that that's an important consideration versus artificial intelligence, where I think that we've got this big perception that we've seen in the media, dare I say it, also in movies as well, where we've got, this horrible perception of machines making decisions and machines sort of like taking over what traditionally have been sort of like human responses. And I think it's important to note, as we talk about the fairness, we talk about the privacy, we talk about how technology gets utilized. To me, one of the biggest safeguards we've got is to make sure that we've got the humans in the loop. So everything that we look at, everything that we're thinking about, any decision that's being made out of our artificial intelligence ultimately goes to the human to push the button to say, yes, this is what we want to be doing. So I think that that's a very important consideration. And to me, that also sets us, just a little bit of a sigh of relief, right? I mean, I don't see a future anytime soon where we're going to be completely autonomous and humans are going to be taken out of the loop. So that way we've got a little bit of a control mechanism as we're moving in there. I think the second point that I would like to be making, right, is around use cases. So when we talk about whether AI has failed or whether AI has done what it's supposed to do, once again, I do believe that, sort of our perception has been framed a lot by other industries and other perceptions, right? I think if we look at augmented intelligence from the standpoint of an individual use case by use case basis, then I think we can be much more fair and objective about whether we've been successful or perhaps we've been less successful. When this topic comes up, I always relate to a story that I had within IBM probably about 3 to 4 years ago now. And I was talking to one of our leaders in AI space in the government. And she's a very well-known, very, very well-known lady. She works at, some of the very secret agencies that we've got, within the United States where I'm based. And, she sort of level set for me. She's like, look, Nick, is what you're asking for and what you're asking the technology to do is incredibly, incredibly advanced, right? Even if you make a simple decision, Jeff, where would you like to go for breakfast in the morning? Think about all those micro decisions that are going to be made. Think about all the human perception elements that get added into this. When we watch that on TV or in the media, we see this as a seamless sort of decision where AI is making that decision. But there's so many inputs that need to be processed to get to that output that we want to be seeing. So she was telling me a lot about the maturity of the technology, right? I mean, at the time, 3 or 4 years ago, she was saying, if AI was even at the level of a 2 or 3 year old in sort of like human evolution steps, that would be a good thing. And we're seeing there's going to be another, I think at least another 10 years or so before we start even getting into our teenage years. as we talk about evolution. And I think that is really important to keep in mind as we're saying, hey, is AI successful, is AI not successful? But if I choose a good use case, right, and I use that really good use case to, oh, bear with me 1 second. Sorry about that. That was AI calling me and telling me that I need to speed up a little bit. If I think about the use case and where we can use the technology really, really well, you know, I like to use our AI ladder: collect, organize, analyze, and infuse, right? If I'm collecting and organizing information, is there some way, for instance, Nazar is sitting there every day, he's just like frustrated. He's got to spend all of his time going and finding the data. He's got to be collecting the data. He's got to be like cataloging the data. And then he can finally do his analysis, right? I mean, he's spending the bulk of his time doing sort of low value added activities. If I can use technology to really handle those, what we are calling like the data fabric elements, that's going to free his time up, right? That's going to keep him in the decision loop. He's going to be able to see what's going on and how that's going to be working. To the point that you make about, you know, data privacy, I think it's really important that we keep all of the decisions that we make, all of the data that Nazar has been collecting, very transparent, right? We want to know the pedigree, and we want to know the provenance of the information that he's been collecting, because ultimately that's all going to feed into our ML model, right? So if I choose my use cases carefully, if I apply the technology where it wants to be applied and where it works very well to be applied, then I think we can consider that to be successful to some extent, right? Then finally, where am I seeing with governments? I mean, I would say the biggest concern I have with governments is about speed generally, right? Moving with speed. I think, you know, as we've seen in this sort of like COVID world, we've been able to move a lot faster. We've been able to make decisions a lot more quickly. And I think that what that's doing is sort of bridging the gap, right? Nazar, picking on Nazar again, right? He's got a tremendous amount of things and tasks that he's got to do on a daily basis. He's only got a certain number of minutes that he can do that. How do I close that gap? I think that's where AI, augmented intelligence, I think that's where the technology can really come in and can be harnessed to do what he wants to do and what he needs to do in just a lot more of an efficient and a lot more effective manner. If he wants to sit there and he wants to figure out, hey, I've got 20 things to do, which one should I do first? He can optimize himself, right, using technology to make that recommendation. And that doesn't mean that those other tasks are unimportant, that they can't be done, right? But what that does mean is that he can focus on where his time and where his attention is most useful and most needed. So I think that using the right use cases with the right governance, with the right sort of like guardrails around what you're doing and how you're doing it, I think those are going to be key for us as we move forward. And that way we can move forward with a little bit more pace, right? I always go down the line of Deema's had me say this many times, right? Think big, start small, and scale fast, right? We don't need to eat this elephant all in one go. Take it one bite at a time, prove out the success, and then scale fast. Then if you might have a little bit of a problem, you might trip up every now and again, fail fast. You know, let's not make this a big deal. Let's not make this a big, expensive investment. Let's get started and let's start seeing the benefits that we can find. Back to you, Jeff.
Nick, thank you so much. Before tossing this over to Deema, I remember being in a conversation with the director of analytics at Ford Motor Company, and we were talking about a number of things related to connected vehicle and smart mobility. Yeah. And we ended the meeting by saying, how can you make your consumers feel loved, not monitored? So this is a good introduction for me to introduce Deema. And the question that I have for Deema is, we of course want the best for everybody on this planet, but can you tell us some personal experiences that you've witnessed in country that further describes how you've seen the gathering of personal data, who's infected, with the end goal of saving lives, but further training AI technologies and limiting further economic harm? What type of new social controls have you seen in country that you've witnessed that you can share with us today?
Sure, Jeff. I think we all have witnessed how the pandemic has exploited how the different governments are, treating privacy and data, given the current circumstances that we're living in. So at one end of the spectrum, we're seeing, locations or places where every bit of information is being collected without transparency on how that information is being handled or treated. at the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing people, advocating and fighting for the rights to protect their own personal information, even if that's at the expense of their own safety and well-being. So personally, myself and my family, we've experienced that firsthand during the pandemic between here, Saudi Arabia, and in the United States. However, me being a Saudi, I'll shed some light on my personal experience here in the country. When the pandemic first hit, the first thing that we were mandated to do is to download an app called Tawakkalna. And this is in reference to what Nick was talking about governments having to accelerate their adoption and, handling situations as they're coming about. Because I think the pandemic was a big chance for Saudi Arabia to accelerate its digital transformation. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Also, in reference to what Nick was mentioning about starting small and then building upon the success until you get to the end result that you want to get to, which I will talk about with the Tawakkalna app. So what is this all about? The Tawakkalna app is an application that is developed here locally by the Saudi Data and AI Authority, or SDAIA. It's linked to the national IDs of all citizens and expats living here. And the SDAIA connected the app to all the different ministries. And I'll explain how that comes into play. So the idea behind the app is that it tracks and collects all COVID-related information in order for us to keep, to enforce the regulations that the country took in place in light of the pandemic. So if, for example, I'll give you a few examples. If you get tested and you test positive for COVID, it's going to show on the app. If, for example, you need to be quarantined because of travel or because you tested positive, it's going to show you the parameter that you should be staying within without exceeding that parameter. So if you exceed that, or if you step beyond that, you're going to get an alert on the app that you're doing so. And the authorities are going to get an alert as well. They will be in touch with you either to enforce, whatever they need to do, whether it's a fine or to check on you if something is wrong. But that shows you the amount of control that the government put in place in order to ensure that everyone is well and safe. As the vaccines started rolling over, that's where the app started getting bigger and bigger, because now we have vaccination information. What kind of vaccine did you get? When was the first dose? When is your second dose due? Even as we are traveling now, it's being used as a way to show proof of our vaccination status. There's also a barcode for those who want to validate the authenticity of the vaccination information that we're providing. So it's more like a digital health passport that we have within the app as well. Another feature that I found interesting, which is similar to, in fact, it was launched at about the same time that the iOS, they advertised that they've got the exposure kind of feature in the iPhone and the other products. What happens is that if you come in close proximity with someone who tested positive within 3 days of you being in touch with them or in close proximity with them, you would be alerted through the app to get tested. It's not going to disclose who that person is or where you've met them. You don't need to know who that person is. You're just going to get an alert for your own safety to go get tested just in case if you've got COVID. So this is just a sample of the features that are continuously being added to the application as we're speaking right now. But the way, and to your point, Jeff, when you asked about how that had the social implication here in Saudi, the way the app has been utilized is that wherever you need to be out and about, you need to have the app, you need to have it active on your phone. No matter what kind of phone you've got to show that. So if you're visiting any establishment, whether it's the supermarket or a restaurant or a government building, or even traveling domestically, you need to show your status as being vaccinated, you don't have COVID, in order for you to be granted access there. So personally, it gave me ease of mind that whenever I'm running my errands or going back to a certain extent to our regular life back again, it's giving me an ease of mind knowing that everyone around me is to a certain extent is safe. Now, one might argue that how do you guarantee that the establishments are enforcing that as well? There has been a crackdown on all establishments here. They're under, they're under the microscope. If anyone is not enforcing these regulations, they're not checking the temperature, they're not checking the Tawakkalna app status as you are being admitted, they get fined some establishments have been closed down because they did not adhere to those regulations. So in a nutshell, it's showing that that's how the country managed to get into everyone, into the system, knowing what everyone is doing, and to ensure that everyone is pretty well, taken care of. So that's just an example of how technology and data played a major role here in our country in order to handle the pandemic.
Great overview. Thank you so much, Deema, for sharing some of your personal experiences. I think this is a great transition to ask Mohammed some questions further around a predictive perspective. Obviously, Mohammed is a very, very seasoned technologist. In terms of your perspectives around leveraging AI to train neural networks to forecast the spread, Mohammed, when do you think either the government or corporate policies have either crossed the line or in some cases just flat out violated human privacy? Should we accept the fact that to get through this pandemic, can we just all accept the fact that human privacy just doesn't exist anymore? We'd love to know what your perspective is there.
Thank you, Jeff, for this excellent, tough question. I believe we are living in a different world. 5.2 billion smartphones, 4.7 billion internet users. Data privacy is becoming a pressing issue for national security worldwide now. And it redefines the term too. So this is a different perspective. I think countries have to define or defend its cyber boundaries similar to its physical boundaries. This is not an easy task by all means. We are fighting against the unknown. Cyberspace is becoming, from the other side, the backyard for organized crime and terror activities. We've been in our part of the world, all over the world actually, we've been witnessing a lot of terror attacks and organized crime activities are taking place in the cyberspace. For example, last year in the United States, the country had like 1 billion cyber attacks and 150 million personal files exposed. Those are really crazy numbers. So the word cyber, if you look at the NATO assembly last June in Brussels, can you imagine the word cyber is mentioned like 25 times in the final statement? And the NATO considering now the massive cyber attack is considered as a act of war again by the NATO members. And cyber attacks becoming on the top of the agenda between the superpowers, United States and Russia, United States and China, to avoid another Bay of Pigs crisis. The problem now, Jeff, is government and business are totally depending on advanced technologies like AI, like the big data, to perform critical tasks. And this is blurring the lines between economic and national security interests, between privacy and security. So this is not an easy task. I cannot ask governments to just stop collecting data or having, you said the privacy is out of window. I believe in the area of crisis, in the area of such huge number of human beings are using technology all over the world, and we have a lot of things related that could affect badly the national security of nations. So this is, we need to consider this as a sophisticated matter. It's not as easy as it seems to be. That's why we need to have a sort, from my humble opinion, that we need to have a framework, international framework, that could resolve a lot of issues that related to privacy, to distinguish between privacy and security, to distinguish between economic interests and the national security interests. We need to redefine this blurring, or having a clearer vision of this blurring lines. I would say this couldn't be done on the countries level individually. I think they should be considered as one of the top emerging pressing issues by the United Nations. That should such things should be brought to the Assembly of United Nations. The leaders of the world, they need to sit and discuss this new world, the new dynamics, the new phenomena. Again, such privacy, such the data leakage, the cyber attacks, preventing such new norms and new threats that coming from the cyber world, they need to have to be redefined. We need to have it in a format that make things clearer for government, for citizens, for businesses, how things are conducted, how the data could be used, how the data could be manipulated for the sake of the safety of the country, for the sake of the safety of citizens, for the sake of the safety of businesses. I think we are facing new norm, and that's why we need a new way of conducting things again. That's why I think policymakers also should get a sort of a background about technology, about the emerging technology, about the technology development or the positive side of the technology, as well as the negative side of the technology, while formulating and articulating policies and laws and regulations. We need to consider the good side of the technology on the economic side, on the social side, on the security side, as well as consider the threats. That's why we need a new breed of policymakers that either they have a technology background, or they are depending on chief forecasting, technology forecasting officers who could tell them what would be the future look like. We'll have a new Uber every day. And of course, the pace of development is beyond the capacity of the current legal framework. Actually, I would say they are belong to the last century, or maybe the century before the last century. That's why we need to set a new things for the new norm. Sorry for being so long.
Not at all.
To you, Jeff.
Thank you, Mohammed. Our final question that I would like all the panelists to provide their perspectives on is really more of a futuristic type of perspective. Data, we know, is central to whether we see if some of these AI technology platforms are going to be effective, or whether the data itself is going to be an effective tool against current and future epidemics. But I think the question that I wanted to ask all the panelists, we can start with Deema and then go to Mohammed and then Nick to close today's panel conversation, is should we be concerned or fearful that AI will allow human data privacy concerns to be essentially overridden by any existing or new public health concerns? Can we solve, in your view, these global problems, but as we talked about earlier, balance the need for respecting human dignity? Deema, do you want to start? Excuse me, Mohammed, do you want to start? Then we'll give it to Deema, and then we'll give it to Nick to close. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff, again. I think we need to write a code of ethics for everything in this new world as well. We need to consider that we cannot do things the old way. We need to understand that we are totally different totally living in a different world, and without understanding the dynamics of technology and the impact of technology that affecting everything around us, we need to have more of a digital trust factor. We need to increase a digital trust factor between the government and business as a providers of the services, and between the citizen as consumer of the services. Without that kind of digital trust, I think it would be very hard to realize the real impact of technology. We need to understand that the new regulations, the new laws, the new policies, we need to be assured that they understand the nature of the technology. They can deal with the space of technological speed and advancement, because without understanding this, will make businesses and citizens consume less technology, and definitely this will harm the overall economic and social system. So we need to stop the ambiguity in this area, to be able to capitalize on the I think we had unlimited opportunities through this emerging technology. AI is a great example. Augmented AI or whatever, any emerging technology that could come up. We need to have an ecosystem that can work seamlessly all together without pushing anything against the laws of nature. Thank you.
Deema, your thoughts?
Yes, Jeff. I think there's always an ethical concern whenever we're talking about AI. I mean, we're all aware of how various types of AI helped ease a lot of different applications across the board. However, AI development needs to be value-driven. That's the only way we can ensure that we're eliminating any concerns or violations in the future. So the challenge is to develop AI systems that takes into consideration and respects human values, social harmony, and is backed by, intention of human welfare, on a broader perspective. Yes, AI can be violating our privacy. It can be dangerous, and in extreme cases, it could be even destructive. However, that means that, that's going to be putting a lot of pressure on the developers and researchers working on AI systems, because that's going to be on them. That's going to be their mandate to ensure that everything is on the right track. So developing AI systems with ethics and value is the need of the hour. And, in reference to what I was just talking about how in Saudi, we managed to do this whole thing. Of course, there was a concern about data privacy and sharing all of that information. However, last week, the Saudi Council of Ministers announced that they approved the personal data protection law, which is similar to the GDPR in Europe. So that way we ensure that even moving forward, as we are adopting more technologies, as we are enforcing AI into our daily lives, that any misuse of our personal information or any unlawful disclosure of our personal information is going to be protected by the law.
Nick, I wanted to get your thoughts as well.
One quick comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Before, actually, maybe I forgot to say that Egypt has already developed a similar law for data protection, maybe in 2018. And that's why the laws and the regulations that understand the nature of technology and impact of technology and impact of data would help a lot the country, and from the social perspective, from the economic perspective, to gain more trust of the citizen and the businesses.
Thank you for that. Nick, we'll have you provide your comments, and then we'll close, then flip it back to Nazar for any closing comments. And thank you to the panelists and to the audience for attending our session today. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone. Yeah, I think to piggyback on, my two esteemed colleagues, as they were talking, a couple of thoughts really did resonate with me. Mohammed, I think you're onto something. I really do think you're onto something, right? I think, if I use the term ecosystem, right? If I think about, if anyone makes a decision in isolation, government, be it a business, be it, an individual, when it comes down to AI, I think that that's going to be very difficult and very problematic, right? I was working very closely with the United Nations and their environment program. And one of the areas that they were looking at, right, was policy effectiveness. right? And they knew that they could sit there, they're headquartered in Nairobi in Kenya, and they could come out with all these wonderful, wonderful policies around environmental protection. And they sort of like have come to the realization that if I'm sitting there, how do I get this sort of like whole world view, right? Anyone from Indonesia over to the Turks and Caicos Islands, over to the UK, all the way down to like wherever it is in the world, right? They're outlining these big strategic development goals. And if there's not that interplay with the constituent population, it doesn't work, right? And Mohammed, I see you nodding your head up and down, right? I mean, I think that's what we've come to see, is that if I do everything in isolation, it's just not going to work. Now, of course, that it causes a whole other issue about speed, right? Because we don't want to slow these things down. But I do think, you know, to me, we use the term co-creation. How do we co-create together, right? How do we bring the ecosystem together so that everyone's sort of aware about what's going on? That way we don't get those sort of unintended consequences that we would, you know, unfortunately run into when you come up with one policy and then someone reinterprets it a slightly different way, or it doesn't quite address what you need it to address. I think the second point, which I think both of you guys made, which I think is a good one, right, is government on their own, and this is why I think the ecosystem is really important, maybe don't understand, you know, or they're not as deeply invested in the technology, in the development of the technology. When we look at the research that's going on around AI and other, you know, sort of emerging technologies, how can you possibly sit there and legislate and mandate and create these policies and procedures and these guardrails, if you will, if you don't really understand what the technology is doing, where that technology is going? So I do think it's beholden upon industry and technology companies and government to come together and making sure the citizens are coming in so they feel comfortable, so that, you know, Deema and her family don't get sort of like negatively impacted. If you have your say and you want to participate, you should be able to do that in a very easy and fair manner. And then flipping back once again to the technology companies and corporations, I do think it is beholden on the likes of the IBMs of the world, right? We have our AI ethics board. So anytime I want to do an AI project in Saudi, if I want to do it in England, if I want to do it in America, no matter where it is in the world, right, we have to go through and we have to pass through our AI ethics board. It's not a closed door conversation of a black box, right? All of those decisions are open. You can ask IBM, you can ask our general counsel how to get, you know, why a decision was being made. And we've made some really sort of very tough decisions, right? But I think we've made them with the best of intentions when it comes down to pursuing some of these emerging technologies. Facial recognition, for example, right? We were, I would say, arguably one of the leaders in facial recognition. We were using it with law enforcement customers. We were using it with defense agencies, national security agencies. And our CEO, Arvind, has said, you know, time out on that. You know, this is not a technology that we wish to pursue. This is not something that we feel comfortable from an IBM standpoint. And we need to be in dialogue and debate. Remember what I said before, use cases. What's the use case and what's the specific use case where I'm going to apply that technology? And I think that's the sort of ethical stance. It makes me proud to be an IBMer, but it makes me proud to be in technology, because, you know, we can self-police to a certain extent, but we do need to have that whole ecosystem coming together. I think if we can do that, then we'll get what we need to do. We need to be flexible. We do need to be agile, and we do need to like encompass everything. But I do think the future is incredibly, incredibly bright, right? I'm at heart a complete and utter optimist, right? As I look through, you know, the lens of where we're going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Jeff, you've seen so many things in your sort of like transformation journey working with IBM. I see that future for all of us, right? And we've got to do it in a very systematic and a very sort of like governed manner. But I do think we're going to see amazing, amazing advances in this area.
Thank you, Nick, for closing what I thought was one of the better panels that we've done. And on behalf of the IBM company, the IBM Corporation, wanted to again extend our thanks to the IAMOT and to Nile University for giving us the chance to execute on this panel, to provide our point of view. And I will now turn it back over to Nazar and Dr. Khalil for any closing comments. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thanks to the panelists. It's been a wonderful panel, actually, as we all are trying to find our way through the maze of this new complex world that we are facing. It's really something that we have to be aware of and cognizant about what's going on, and maybe take whatever precautions needed at the personal level, as well as obviously at the institutional levels in there. It has been a great panel. Appreciate it, and appreciate all your participation in here. Nazad, now we, I think, ready to go to the closing session of IAMOT 2021. And do you want to give instructions as how that's going to happen? Are you there, Nazar? I think what we're going to do right now is we will turn off the webinar, and then you can turn on your Zoom connection, so you can connect to the closing session, where we will announce the next conference, have a short presentation on it. We will announce the best paper winners and the awards to the participants and to the all the people that actually contributed to the conference. Thank you, and have a safe and prosperous time, hopefully, and hopefully we can end this COVID-19 so we can meet together next year, and we can get to shake hands one more time and actually mingle and interact and see each other in person.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Khalil. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to be part of this great panel and distinguished panelists. It was a pleasure and honor, hopefully, as Professor Khalil said, to meet you in person next year in IAMOT 2022. Thank you so much. Thank you.